for those of you who are familiar as a result, probably of Dr. Cornel West, with Tavis Smiley, he's a pretty well-known figure within the Black community. And while he is a avowed Democrat, he has never denied such. He's always been reasonably fair with the Green Party. And he especially was fair when initially Dr. West was running in the Green Party before things obviously switched up. And so last night he did interview Jill Stein, but this is where things get very interesting. Apparently, the DNC gave him marching orders to ask certain questions. Otherwise, there would be consequences. So here we go.
Number 3 in this email, I quote from the email from the DNC. Earlier this month, she, Jill Stein, told Newsweek falsely that she was not taking GOP help in this race. We put out a statement, we being the DNC apparently, put out a statement noting how false that was with more background here. There's a link in this email for me to see the background. Then we learned this week that she, in fact, paid a lawyer who was involved in cases to overturn the 2020 election results. Dr. Jill Stein.
So the potential involvement of GOP operatives was not at any kind of strategic or meaningful level. I think what they're referring to is that petition gatherers who can come from all political spectrum, all across. And in fact, we hired Democrats to assist with signature collection. This is routine. And I think the case that they're referring to, the campaign was not aware of. Petitions were given to us, which volunteers do all the time. So yes, and then it turns out that one of those gatherers may have been a Republican operative, which we were not aware of at the time. So this happens all the time. Let's look at the real corruption in this system. And by the way, the rules in this system are made by Democrats and Republicans. They're not made by us. And the Democrats announced, in fact, that they had hired an army of lawyers to try to find technical trivia to throw us off the ballot in violation of the spirit of the law, that they would be using the letter of the law, and hired an army of lawyers to throw competitors off the ballot.
And that is the great point of emphasis, that no matter what the DNC tries to throw or threaten and suggest that, oh, you're a Putin puppet or you're an operative or anything of that nature. And I do apologize because I played this a little too quickly. We're going to continue with the questions, but then I'm going to play the part where Tavis explains exactly why these questions were put forward, which is very interesting how he explains it. But
can we, I honestly dislike the term operative. What does that mean? Are you trying to make anybody who's affiliated with a party sound somehow like a secret agent?
Well, don't forget. Well, hold on a minute. Don't forget that there are people that have come up to you personally and have told you that they really would like to support you against Wasserman Schultz, but I can't do it. They will bury me if I do it. And This is the same thing. It's like, you interview Jill Stein, you're going to do what we say. And if you don't do what we say, we are going to bury you. We don't care who you are. And the Democrats do this. The Republicans don't do this. The Republicans don't really care. I just think that the Republican mindset is so much more of a winning mindset, whereas the Democrat mindset is more of a play not to lose mindset.
Well, they're victims. They like to be victims.
They do. They like to listen. I've said, and I think a lot of people would agree, the whole thing about going after Jill Stein is just making sure they got all their ducks in a row if they don't win, because they want to know exactly where to point the finger so that it's not at them. That's what it's about.
One of the ways they did that in the 2022 election, they actually impersonated the Green Party. They called people who had signed our petitions, telling them that they were the Green Party and would they please take their name off of the signature. So they were committing fraud and impersonation in order to get our Senate candidate at the time, Matthew Hoh in North Carolina, off of the ballot. They happened to call the chair of the Green Party while they were pretending to be the Green Party and told him that he needed to take his name off the ballot. The Green Party wanted him to do that. He recorded the conversation. It was brought to court. They were found guilty of basically, I would say, I would call it fraud. They called it operating with dirty hands. So this is what the Democrats do. They also advertised publicly for people to manage infiltrators and spies to mess up our petition drives. So yes, this is a very corrupt and dirty system. We happen to be caught by it when we know in advance that there's someone who is breaking the rules that we didn't make. When someone is breaking these rules, we reject that support. In this case, someone posing as a volunteer just dropped off the signatures.
Issue number 4, raised in this email to me from the DNC. I quote, last week, Stein was endorsed by David Duke.
Woo!
David Duke.
As
who
opposed
said that
to
he made the
Cheney.
endorsement after thinking about, quote, what's good for white people.
Listen, I ain't endorsing the KKK, but how many people has David Duke killed compared to how many people
That
Dick
doesn't
Cheney's
even, that's
killed?
not the point. I find, and Colin says that the first clip of him, I guess, is the one explaining the thing about the DNC. But the problem with that is, and as somebody who has been a candidate, you can't control who endorses you, right? Like, you can control who you brag about endorsements from. That's the only control that you have. You like, and I know that Jill Stein then said she rejected that endorsement, which she shouldn't even have to do. You don't have to reject an endorsement.
Shouldn't even dignify it with a response.
No. And so it is so ridiculous to me that the party of people that are bragging about an endorsement from a war criminal are criticizing her for an endorsement that she hasn't even mentioned.
You know, for a race that apparently is so close, they really do seem to have a lot of time, effort, and money to throw at little Jill Stein. I tell you.
I like it because it means they're scared. They need to
should.
set up their excuse for losing too.
That's exact. Hey, they should be scared.
For Europeans, close quote. What say you about being endorsed by David Duke?
Apparently he didn't know that I'm Jewish. And who put him up to this is what I'd like to know. And of course, we rejected that out of hand.
Okay.
She
Issue number 5 on this issue, this email from the DNC. Stein has repeatedly said she has no regrets about being a spoiler in the 2016 election, even after everything Trump did in office. See background below, and there's all kind of background below to make this particular point. There's that word spoiler again. I don't like the word, but the issue they raise here, I do want to interrogate. And that is this notion that you could, in this election, you are on the ballot in every single one of these swing states. Speaking of the New York Times, they did an article the other day about you and Cornel West, and I'm blanking on his name now, the Libertarian Party candidate, Chase.
Chase Oliver?
Yes, Chase Oliver,
yes.
Who's been a guest on this program as well. I've invited everybody on this program. This issue that they're raising in this email from the DNC is that you're potentially pulling votes away, back to this issue again, from Kamala Harris, and that you could end up being like Ralph Nader and handing the election to the other guy, in this case, Donald Trump. Your thoughts?
So, number one, if they're concerned about the potential to draw votes away from another candidate, which in my view is wrong from the get-go, for the most part, us independent alternative candidates largely give people who otherwise won't vote a reason to come out and vote. Remember, that's 1 out of every 3. That's largely people of color, low income, younger, who aren't voting. They don't buy the 2 zombie political parties being rammed down their throats. So people deserve those choices. I reject the spoiler framing. But let's look at what the evidence seems to be showing right now. In fact, that we are drawing votes from Trump, and not from, to the extent that you accept this framing, it appears to be Trump, according to 2 recent polls, from whom we are drawing votes, particularly in swing states. So I'd say this is just wrong. Most importantly, Democrats can solve this by passing ranked choice voting. If you subscribe to this view that multiple candidates may be taking votes away from each other, which, by the way, you're supposed to do in an election, that's what democracy is about, competing for votes. So that, it's wrong-headed on that count as well. But there's a solution called ranked choice voting, which Greens have been advancing and supporting forever. It lets you rank your choices, and it ensures that you're never taking votes away from someone else, that as a candidate who can't win, you are never drawing votes away from someone else. And
I find this an angry. I'm so angry about all of this. Like, I can't. I don't think I'm going to get out of this whole thing without an ulcer. First of all, I voted for Ralph Nader, and he wears that spoiler badge proud, and he should. And, first of all, I agree. There shouldn't even be that concept. It's so stupid. Screw everybody who thinks that. Seriously. Go play strategy somewhere else. Go play a board game. Your vote is your vote.
you know, we have a great frame of reference, if you remember, just back in 2020. You know, the DNC successfully kicked, not that he mattered in any capacity, but they kicked Howie Calkins of the Green Party off of the ballot in Wisconsin, among other states. Now, Joe Jorgensen, who was the Libertarian Party candidate, and for those of you who remember, Wisconsin in 2020 was razor thin that landed in Biden's camp. There were enough votes, unquestionably, from Joe Jorgensen on the Libertarian ticket that if it had been shifted over to, let's say, Trump would have won Wisconsin. You haven't heard a single word from the GOP about any of that shit. No one ever talks about that because it's ridiculous on its face. And that's why they're better electoral strategists, because they know that most people that are voting for Jill Stein were never intending to vote for Kamala Harris anyway.
Ever. They know that. I think they know that, but they just got to set up they just got to have their built-in excuse for when they lose.
We'll finish it up.
It's a simple system. You rank your choices. If your first choice doesn't win on the first count, then your vote is basically reassigned to your second choice. So there's never a throwaway vote. Votes are never taken from one candidate to another. It's a great system. It's win-win. It's used in about 25 cities around the country. It's used in the state of Maine. Oregon and Washington State are voting on it. But the Democrats are fighting it. Why are they fighting it? Because they want to use fear to extort your vote. They could win our votes. You know, and Kamala Harris is all freaked out because we're attracting the Arab vote. Well, she could attract the Arab vote if she simply stopped killing and massacring children and women and innocent civilians in Gaza. She could win those votes. She doesn't want to talk about that issue at all, so they would rather just blame and shame voters for standing up and voting our values. Don't listen to it. Don't let them talk you into compromising your values.
Yep.
Very powerful.
Agreed.
And of course, this is something where, look, we don't have to play the clip, but
yeah, no, I think we've
Tavis goes into great detail about how he got this email from the DNC basically telling him that we have a list of questions we would like for you to ask Jill Stein. And they did it in a way that basically suggested that if you don't do what we ask, you're going to have a problem. And so the way he frames it is a very sleight of hand, which I liked, which is as if to say, I really don't want to have to ask these questions to you, but I'm basically being told I have to do it. So
and it makes the Democrats look as ridiculous as they are.
Absolutely. It makes them look terrible, but they don't care. They're actually they're just kind of accepting of their stupidity and corruption now. Like, to me, it's just really out in the open. Like, they have no shame.